Hello, this is Kirk. Welcome to On Purpose. I'd like to thank John and Kelly Gardner for supporting this podcast through patreon.com. No matter what happens next, guys, you'll always be the first. If you'd like to join the Gardners in supporting this podcast, you too can do that at patreon.com/onpurpose with Kirk Wayman. Thanks. So we've spent the first 4 episodes dialoguing about stories and how stories work in our lives and the positions that we take within those stories, the position of character and author, the way in which stories guide our lives, and our ability to rewrite them or not, how that works. And you may be wondering, in a podcast about purpose and developing purpose in your life, why did we start with stories? And the reason is quite simple. For the purposes of our conversation, I want you to maintain the position of author moving forward. I want you to be able to hold that position, because it is only the author who's capable of actually moving forward on the question of purpose. Characters have pre-described purposes. They have conclusions about purpose. They don't ask this question, but the author does. And so I want to talk to the author. I want to talk to you, the author of your life. The author has the capacity to understand my next statement. And it might feel a little shocking at first. Maybe it doesn't. But I'd like to suggest to you that life lacks purpose. That fundamentally, at its core, life is meaningless. You may have seen Simon Sinek's TEDx video where he talks about why. And he introduces the idea of how important the question why is. And he draws 3 concentric circles. And he says there's a why, there's a what, and there's a how. And most of us are focused on the how and possibly the what. But he's asking us to drive deep into ourselves and discover our why. While this is a great talk, it lacks something significant. He says there's a how, there's a what, and at the center of it all is the question why. What's your why? And what's your why has become a way that we talk about the thing that drives us, the meaning and purpose, or even our calling. But I actually want to suggest that there are things deeper than why. That if the answer to why is as deep as you're capable of going, you're probably deep into your motive set, deep into your experience of self, but there's deeper places. There's questions beyond that. That why is the answer to what's your purpose. But it's not the fundamental answer. It's not the fundamental question. And that at life's core, there's something deeper than meaning, and therefore life is fundamentally meaningless. Or you could say life exists beyond meaning, or the fundamentals of life exist beyond meaning. And when you get into that space, you're not worried about meaning anymore. You're not asking those kinds of questions. That if you really want to capture meaningful purpose in your life, you have to go past meaning. You have to abandon it. You have to go deeper than it in order to understand what's there, so that when you drive back out of that, you can actually capture meaning and purpose in your life in a way that you can also take responsibility for. The good news, though, is it's full of suffering. No, wait a minute. How is that good news? What the heck am I talking about now? So now you've told me life is meaningless, and that the only good news there is that it's full of suffering. Yeah. I would also say that it's full of great love, if you can access it. But that great love is not a guarantee, but great suffering is. Suffering is the one thing that every human will experience. And while great love is available to every human, not every human will experience. And so that's why it's good news. There are 2 pathways, according to some writers, that take you past meaning and purpose, that take you into that more central place in your world. And those 2 pathways are great love and great suffering. And the good news is you will experience one of them, and you will be invited into this deeper water. So life is meaningless, but the good news is it's full of suffering. So what do we do now? Well, for some of you, that might be hard to hear. And that's okay, because if you're still lost in the how and the what, and you haven't gotten down into your why, how can you go past that? My youngest son just graduated from high school last night. High school graduation is a rite of passage in our culture. It's a place where we transfer from being a child to being an adult. 13 years of compulsory education is now over, and education now is a choice. We've built a curriculum and said, this is the things that we think you need to learn, and you've learned them, so go contribute, go do something with your life. It's the beginning of the why questions and the what am I going to do with the rest of my life and the pursuit of meaning and purpose. And until this point, much of my son's life has been conditioned by other people, and now he has to start making choices for himself. And at that point in our life, most of us start to wrestle with direction and calling, or what do I do with myself? And it's a bit of a heavy load. Having to make those choices for yourself can be daunting. Well, it is daunting. And we start to feel this existential dread pressing in on us. And we start to ask questions we've never asked before. That's the journey my son is just beginning. We start looking for things external to us that can give us meaning and purpose. It can be things like careers. What career am I going to do that is going to give me meaning and purpose? What kind of mission, what kind of cause can I attach myself to that will provide me with meaning and purpose? People get attached to things like religion, movements like the environmental movement, vegetarian or veganism. Those activities can take on meaning that transcends the activity itself. And it is providing us a definition for what it means to be a good person, what it means to do good in the world. Around those activities, moral codes will form. It is in the environmental movement, it can become good to drive this kind of car and bad to drive this kind of car. The pinnacle of the bad car to drive in the environmental movement became the Hummer. Think about it. Think back to the Hummer. It became a symbol that transcended the vehicle itself, and it became a symbol of what it was to be a bad American for the environmental movement. We attach ourselves to external things so that we can have meaning and purpose. And it goes something like this. We recognize as we begin to age and mature that having ourselves at the center of our life has a series of problems with it. And it's like there's a throne at the center of our life, and we are sitting on it. We are sort of the king of or the queen of our own life. And along the way, we figure out that there are things bigger than us. There are forces at work that are bigger than us, and connecting to those becomes important. And so we have these decentering experiences where we begin to put something else on the throne of our life. Early in our life, we are often looking for external stories, movements, causes, faith claims to provide us meaning and purpose, when in fact, that's not what they're for. And they can't live up to that pressure. And as time goes by, that transaction, that framework that we created starts to fracture and break down. It starts to fall apart. There's ways in which it's not doing that anymore. And we start trying to glue and duct tape this thing together. But eventually, when we face true suffering, very often that'll crack. That'll fracture the meaning of our life. At its fundamental level, I think suffering is not being in control. Great suffering is when that lack of control touches the meaning and purpose structures that we established in our life. When meaning fractures, we call it suffering. And at that point, we have to figure out what to do next. Do we sweep together the pieces of our meaning and try to glue and duct tape them back together and fit them back into the form they once held? Or, as we stare down at our fractured meaning, do we decide that life is actually just meaningless and therefore nothing matters? And we build a pathway to hopelessness? Actually, most of us try one or the other or both of those. Those both seem readily available and we give it a whirl. Or do we look at the meaning that is shattered upon the floor of our life and we sweep it up, and we put it away, and we go, there must be something more important than meaning, and we start to move into it. Great suffering will do that. Great love will as well. It'll unravel us, disrupt us, disturb us, cause us to walk into the chaos of the unknown. And then we're invited to explore. And to a large degree, the rest of this podcast is going to be about that exploration. But let me give you a little insight of some of the subjects that we're going to cover next. One thing that is deeper than meaning and purpose in your life is motive. And I don't mean external motivations, the punishment and reward systems that have been structured for us. I mean intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic meaning it emanates from within you, and you are motivated for the thing itself. The doing of the thing itself is all the reward that you need. The things you can't not do. Intrinsic motivation informs purpose. Or at least the kind of purpose we start out seeking, the purpose that is delivered to us by others. I think there's other things deeper than that, like the relationships we form. There's a way in which the relationships we form have meaning. They are the result of the meaning, but there's also a relationship that we're capable of engaging in that is deeper than meaning, that has no prescribed purpose to it. It just is. And there's a way in which we can be with that is deeper than the need for meaning, where we just are. I went away for a 24-hour personal retreat just by myself, a solo into the mountains. And I thought I was going to go up into the mountains and be productive. I thought I had meaning and purpose. I thought I had a reason to go up there, and I had a list of things I wanted to do, tasks I wanted to accomplish. And I took my gear and I took my stuff and I got up into the hills and I parked myself beside a creek. And then I started to get quiet. And within a few hours, I realized I wasn't going to accomplish anything in these 24 hours except to just be. I got quieter and quieter and quieter until I was just with. I was with myself. I could hear myself. I was with the environment that I was part of. I sat and just talked to a tree for a while. I thought about what it would be like to be a tree. And I wasn't very productive. Turns out I just needed to be quiet. We call this the contemplative life, where success and accomplishment fade and melt away, and there's something else going on. I hope by the end of this journey together you'll discover that I have a great value for purpose and meaning, that I have a great value for the ways in which we answer what's your why. But I think until we can move past them, we are often caught in the trap of looking for those things in external experiences instead of taking responsibility for them internally from a place of meaninglessness that drives us back into extraordinary meaning and purpose in life. I hope to see you on episode 6.